Sports media. We've all consumed it in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's watching your favorite sport live as it happens, or a sports movie, TV show, documentary, or even docuseries. Sports, in whatever capacity you consume it, has always and will always be a popular form of content that people enjoy worldwide, and Formula One is not exempt from this. We've all seen the cult-like following that sports have. For instance, football, basketball, American football. All of these sports have huge fan bases who are very passionate about the teams and players they support, and they have even higher profile athletes. Again, Formula One is not exempt from this. In fact, in the past few years, the sport has only become more high profile and more enticing. It has always been the pinnacle of motorsport due to its high speeds and advanced technology, and people who have been fans of Formula One have always known this to be true. But in 2019, Netflix released Drive to Survive and introduced a whole new audience to Formula One and pretty much essentially changed the culture of F1 viewership forever. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to Formula One and Drive to Survive. The good. Broaden viewership to the sport. The ultimate goal of Drive to Survive was to bring in more viewership to Formula One, especially from America, and clearly it worked. I mean, it worked so well that as of this year, there's not one, not two, but 3 GPs in America. There's Miami, Austin, and Vegas. So with the boom of Drive to Survive and its success in America, not only did it result in more races, but ESPN has also reported on the success of viewership that they have been receiving lately. And even though there have been rumors as of recent circulating around about how the viewership in America is now starting to wane, I think it's pretty safe to say that Liberty Media struck gold with Drive to Survive. I mean, not only did they have more eyes on the sport, but it became evident to see that the audience was becoming more diverse. They were receiving a younger crowd of viewers, people of color, and an explosion of women watching the races. I'm not saying that Drive to Survive is the sole reason that women watch F1, because even before the Netflix series, women have always been involved in the sport. But the stats do add up. In an article from Reuters, it is said that Netflix's Drive to Survive, a docuseries tracking F1 teams, topped the streaming company's viewing rankings in 33 countries when it was released at the beginning of the 2022 season, according to Formula One. The company says it has been vital for reaching new fans, including women. Around 40% of F1 fans are now female, up 8% from 2017, and more women are attending races too. Additionally, Andrew Westacott, CEO of the Australian Grand Prix, in an interview with Sky News, said previously ticket purchasing for the Australian GP has been 70% male, 25% female, and the purchasing for the 2022 Australian Grand Prix has been 60-40 due to the boom of Drive to Survive, and that it has also brought in a younger crowd as well. Speaking from my own experience, while I've always known about Formula One and its big stars, I never really fully sat down and watched a race up until the past few years, and to be quite truthful, that is thanks to Drive to Survive. The show introduced me fully into the world of Formula One and it allowed me to understand the inner workings of the sport. Once I realized that I was more into it than just a Netflix series, I quickly signed up for F1 TV and caught up on as many races as I could. I made my way through the 2010s, now I'm going through the 2000s, and I'm just working back, so it's safe to say that I'm hooked and I can't stop talking about it, hence why we're all here today. But the docuseries did what Liberty Media and Netflix intended for it to do, and that was to bring more viewership into the sport and diversify the viewership. May that be from more women watching it, people of color, or a younger crowd. People are watching the sport, and a large part of that is thanks to Drive to Survive. The show also allows viewers to get behind the scenes coverage. Like with any other sport, when you watch the live coverage of it, what viewers are privy to is the game, post-game interviews, and whatever the players share on their social media or whatever their team's social media managers decide to share. There really is no behind-the-scenes coverage unless the teams provide you with a short 5-minute clip. An executive producer of Drive to Survive in an article of Sports Illustrated said, "Having spent some time at a couple of races before we started the show, we felt that there was a whole part of the sport that was happening behind the scenes. In the paddock and in the hospitalities and in pre-season and in the gaps between the races. People didn't really know about that, or if they did, they didn't really understand. I think that's what's really cool about Drive to Survive. It allows viewers to get an inside look at some of the fastest teams in motorsport. What's also really great about the show is that as viewers, we get to see the more vulnerable side of drivers that we may not always see when they're on track. I do want to point out, though, that we are not entitled to how the drivers respond to emotional events, but it is cool to see the behind the scenes. A great example of this would be the Romain Grosjean 2020 crash. We all know how scary that crash was. It was terrifying. And what we saw in the show was not only were we able to hear from the other drivers and team principals regarding the incident and the danger that they really put themselves in when it comes to driving these cars, but more importantly, we were able to get an understanding from Romain about what happened, how he felt, and insight from his wife about how she felt seeing her husband go through this terrifying event. These are the details as Formula One fans that we may not necessarily get without the show. Sure, Romain has done sit-down interviews regarding the incident, but it's the fact that Netflix was there in real time capturing it as it happened and got the real-time reaction of the drivers is what I mean by behind-the-scenes coverage and how important it is for this show. Now let's go on to the bad. Amplified drama for the sake of entertainment. Off the back of how great the show is due to the behind-the-scenes coverage we get as viewers, the show does not shy away from creating storylines and dramatizing events. Drive to Survive is a docu-series, and the intention of the show has always been to ensure that it fit the documentary-style genre, but I personally have always viewed it as more of a reality TV show. Why, you may ask? Well, because from what I know of docu-series, and this is just my opinion, they've always been at least one season, and if they do have multiple seasons, each season is typically based on different topics, but with Drive to Survive, it does follow the more modern-day format of reality TV in which it highlights tensions. There's a villain, an underdog, there's the he said, she said, and then there's also the possibly fabricated storylines. It also dramatizes non-existent rivalries. And if you watch season 4 of Drive to Survive, you know what I mean when I say the dramatization of rivalries, especially between teammates. But I'm just saying. Not only have many fans of Formula One complained about the over-dramatization of Drive to Survive, but I mean, the drivers also aren't happy with the show. Max Verstappen himself chose to opt out of season 4 filming due to his concerns with fake storylines that made things over the top. It seems to be that he's not happy with how he has been portrayed on the show, as he mentioned in an interview with AP News. He stated that, "You as a person, you are trying to build a brand just by being myself, but then a series like that can just put you down completely different just because they like it like that, and I think that is very wrong, and I prefer not to be part of it." Which is a fair choice to make for any driver. While he is back on the show now, I do think it is important to highlight that not everything we see is the truth, and the drivers understand the role that the Netflix series plays in Formula One, and while they may not be happy with how they're being portrayed, it is all part of the circus that is F1, and they just seem to go along with it now. With the popularity of the show, race tickets have also seemed to become more expensive. While Drive to Survive may not be the sole perpetrator of the ridiculously high prices of Formula One tickets, it would be negligent of me to completely dismiss it. If F1 viewership has been heightened due to the show, the only logical step for new fans to do is to go and purchase tickets to a race near them. The only issue with this is that tickets are just not affordable. This is due to a mix of things such as heightened viewership in the sport, this post-pandemic era we're in where everyone is leaving their homes again, and honestly, inflation. There are tracks that have the history and the glamour behind them that allow them to be as expensive as they are, but not every Grand Prix is a Monaco, so it doesn't make sense to pay near Monaco prices for Montreal. Yes, it is understandable that F1 as a whole is an expensive sport to maintain, not only for the company, but for the countries and cities that host them, and that is why ticket prices have always been on the higher end. But to go back to Montreal, and I keep picking on Montreal because it's the closest race near me, But to go back to Montreal, I was looking at the 2024 tickets. If you're from Canada, honestly, it's probably cheaper to fly to a different country, get the full 3-day package there plus accommodations than it would be for doing it here in Montreal. I hate to say that, I really do, but it's the truth. So that's all I have to say about the bad when it comes to Drive to Survive in Formula One. It's that the show is overly dramatized and tickets are really expensive. And now, when we go into the ugly, I do have to say that this is more of a social media issue and not a Drive to Survive issue, but they do tie in together, so I wanted to point it out. If you do go into Formula One Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, it ranges from the official social media accounts of the teams, the drivers, F1 analysts, social media affiliates, to fan accounts that are dedicated to each and every driver. And while I don't want to talk too much about social media in Formula One and the fan culture, because there is a toxic side of that fan culture, and I do believe that that part deserves its own segment, there are just some quick things I thought I would mention in this video. So to be quite honest, I did mention earlier that one of the main reasons I got into the sport was because of Drive to Survive. And because of that, I was very hesitant in creating this channel and making videos because I was unsure of how I would be perceived. There is a lot of gatekeeping that goes on within fans of the sport, and I understand that. People want to keep the culture of the sport as authentic as it can be, and they want to drive up bandwagoners. But with the gatekeeping, there does become a point where it does get toxic, and there is that one comment, I know we all know it, where it's the "you must be a Drive to Survive fan." On its face, it's a pretty mild argument to be made. It's used to be condescending, and it's used as a way to drive people out. Additionally, I just never understood the point of that argument because even before Netflix, people have been coming in and out of the sport. Formula One has been around for 70 plus years. It has had its peaks and valleys. So just because it's the hot thing right now, like with any other fad, it will fade away, and the ones who are truly passionate about the sport and truly enjoy it for what it is will stay. That is why that argument just never made any sense to me. Also, it's just a pretty weak argument to use in a debate overall. If you are speaking with someone and you have a differing of opinion over a race that just happened, and that is the argument you go to, it just lets me know that you have no proper rebuttal, and that the rebuttal you have used is a weak rebuttal, and it's a way to drive someone out and be condescending towards them, and that is what I mean by toxic. Overall, I do think that the show has been great for the sport as a whole, and while I can only hope that the dramatization of storylines and the expensive tickets and the terrible gatekeeping culture go away one day, I think that Drive to Survive has been a success, and that's all I have to say for now. Please feel free to leave any comments below on what you think is the good, the bad, and the ugly of Formula One times Drive to Survive, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for listening and watching.